Welcome to AZ TechCast, sponsored by the Arizona Technology Council, with your hosts, Steve Zylstra and Karen Nowicki. AZ TechCast is dedicated to covering innovation and technology in Arizona and beyond. Broadcasted monthly, AZ TechCast invites leading experts to have real conversations about what is happening in the tech sector across the state of Arizona. From regional news to innovative startups, companies, and emerging technologies, AZ TechCast covers the critical issues and economic trends propelling the state's growing tech ecosystem.
What should executives keep in mind when considering the use of generative AI to ensure their organization's data privacy? Well, we're going to find out in just a few minutes from our panel of expert guest speakers. I'm Karen Nowicki, president and owner of Phoenix Business Radio X, and I'd like to welcome you to this month's AZ TechCast, sponsored by the Arizona Technology Council. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to today's featured guest. We have Rebecca Clyde, co-founder and CEO of Botco. Welcome back to the studio, Rebecca.
Thank you, Karen. It's great to be here.
Yes, we're so thrilled to have you. And I knew that when I saw the bio and the information about Botco that you had been on with us before, so I went and double checked. It's been since November of 2020 when we did another episode here with Steve and I on tech trends, AI, automation, and analytics. So we're very excited to have you back.
Great to be here. And a lot has changed since then. So, we'll have a lot of ground to cover here.
I was thinking the same thing. So many things have changed. And this particular conversation has really caught storm specifically. And with Rebecca today is also Chris Maida. He's the Chief Technology Officer at Botco as well. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
Did I pronounce your last name correctly?
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, very good. And also we have with us Demetrius Dillard. He's the Senior Director of ISIT at Aspire Indiana Health. Welcome, Demetrius.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I'm going to say ahead of time that we might lose Demetrius. We're hoping not, because there's a storm. What's going on over there?
It just came on. I didn't check the weather, but it is pretty bad outside. Winds blowing and everything else, sirens, all that. We lost power here for a second, so I had to move really quickly, but I think that's what we're about, adjusting to our circumstances.
Well, we're excited that you were able to log back in and be with us, and hopefully you'll get to be with us for the duration. And sitting over here next to me, along with our accomplished experts, is my buddy Steve Zylstra. He's the Arizona Tech Council President and CEO. Would love for you to introduce yourself, and then we'll have a round robin of introductions with everybody else.
Yeah, I'm Steve Zylstra. Run the Arizona Technology Council, which is a statewide organization dedicated to science and technology-based operations. And glad to have you all here today.
We are getting ready for a fantastic conversation around, of course, AI and some of the differences and nuances between how it's being used and where businesses can really benefit from getting on the train, the AI train. Before we do that, though, we'd really love to have each of you introduce yourselves, a little bit about your background, the role that you play in the tech ecosystem, and then why you think that we've invited you here today. What can you offer us as far as the conversation goes? And Rebecca, would you be willing to start for us first?
Sure, happy to. Rebecca Clyde, I'm a longtime now Arizona resident, and I've actually created 3 more Arizonans by way of being a mother of 3 that were born here. And, I started my career in technology at Intel, which was the reason I moved here right out of undergrad, and really have surrounded myself with technologists pretty much my entire career. I myself am more on the commercial side. I got my MBA at Arizona State University, and have really loved working in the business of tech. And then when Chris and I co-founded Botco AI, along with our third co-founder, Anush Shukla, we were really excited about being able to create a new software solution that took advantage of real-time conversational capabilities that were made possible by technologies like AI. And, from that first day where we just had an idea to today, we've been able to build a product, attract customers, deploy them here, both in Arizona and nationwide. So we're really happy to be here and hopefully represent Arizona well on the stage, the world stage of technology.
Excellent. Chris, how about you?
Okay. Well, if you believe that there's only Arizonans and future Arizonans, then I'm a future Arizonan. So I did my, I come from academic computer science. So I have a bachelor's from MIT and a PhD from Carnegie Mellon. I've lived all over the country following the software industry. And for the last few years, I've been on the East Coast in New Hampshire. And also I've been working in the software industry since the late 90s. I co-founded one of the first marketing automation companies in Silicon Valley. And then I've been working in marketing automation ever since. And then we started Botco when the conversational AI / chat revolution happened 5 or 6 years ago. I was in Asia and someone was like, have you heard of this WeChat thing? There's no websites, there's no email, there's just WeChat. And so that got us really excited about building this new platform.
Excellent. Demetrius, introduce yourself, please.
All right. So officially, I'm Demetrius. I am the Director of Information Systems and Technology for Aspire Indiana Health. I've been in healthcare technology management, holding roles in clinical engineering, in IT and system administration, all the way up through to being a Chief Information Officer for NFQHC. So really well versed in all things healthcare tech. And if you ask my mom, she'll think it's some stuff outside of healthcare tech as well. So I agree. I mean, if we're talking about future Arizonians, I love Arizona. I used to go there every year to vacation. I have not gone in a while. So got to get back to see you all. I've got actually family and friends that live in Phoenix. So,
well, we'd love to have you back. And hopefully this will be an inspiration for you to come and spend some time here in Arizona. Maybe not in the summer months, but right. Yeah. All right. So let's jump into our conversation. Let's start by defining generative AI and how is that different from traditional AI?
Do you want to take that one, Chris?
Yeah, sure. So generative AI is, from our standpoint, generative AI is an AI model that can generate text or generate images, and essentially, create things that are novel. So previously, AI tended to do things that were more analytic. So it could look at text and say, this is a positive statement or a negative statement. It could do machine translation from one language to another. But it was, it couldn't do the things that we're seeing with AI today, which is like it can write essays, it can critique text, it can paint, or it can generate images. So I think it's the fact that the AIs can now do things that appear creative to us is kind of the main difference between generative AI and the stuff that's come previously.
Anyone want to add anything to that?
Yeah.
I would say probably one of the exciting things and why it's captured the world's imagination is because, people can use it in so many different ways. And it has finally become accessible to regular folks. I think people like Chris have been working in AI since, 20 something years. I don't want to date you, but but typically it was something that was set aside for the computer scientists, for the machine learning community, for really folks that had, lots of letters after their name. And now for the first time, it's really something that everybody has access to. And so I think the consciousness about what's possible and how it can be used, and the expectation now that businesses have that they're using that capability has all of a sudden increased, right? Because people know that it's there. They're like, hey, I can use it. So why aren't you using it as a business to make my life easier? And I think that's the shift that is happening right now that we're all experiencing, and why, there's now pressure in every single organization, every single boardroom to figure out how to utilize this capability to the best use possible, to make services better, to make customer experiences better, to create more efficiency within organizations, and to reduce costs.
So I can't go to an event or have a conversation anymore without AI coming up. It's just everywhere. And why is that? Why is all of the sudden AI being discussed by just about everyone?
Well, I think from my perspective, it's I'll categorize it as a healthy fear, but also just a healthy sense of curiosity. How far can AI take us? How far should AI take us? Which are very good questions, and questions that if you've not thought about them, you will soon, because a lot of the things that we do, whether it's dealing with Siri, whether it's dealing with Google, there's some other ones out there, Alexa. There's a lot of different things that we can benefit from or add value when it comes to AI. So I think it's a healthy fear and curiosity at the same time.
So Rebecca alluded to this. How can organizations take advantage of generative AI? And what do you think is the skepticism that companies have about utilizing generative AI?
Well, from my standpoint, I think one thing that we attempt to do, or what we do really well, is leverage AI and tech in general in order to offset some of the burdens, administrative wise, financial wise, and operational wise. So that puts us in a unique position where we can look at the AI and say, for one, how many calls can we avoid coming into our contact center? In most cases, healthcare companies are struggling when it comes to contact center staffing. So if we can leverage a large part of, what people are calling for customer service requests, quick questions, if we can allow the AI to do that, that adds value all across the board. One of the challenges with that, though, is that when we talk about the QA, how do we judge or determine how accurate that data is? Do we, manage and take care of that on a as frequent basis if we had people doing that? Or are we able to allow the generative AI to be able to ingest, FAQs and other data sets in order to keep that information updated? So that is one of those fear points. But again, the point about the curiosity is how can we quantify or get the ROI from that? And when we are able to do that, it speaks volumes for itself.
Rebecca or Chris, anything from the Baco AI perspective regarding that question?
Yeah, I just to build on what Demetrius said, I think the AIs are really good at doing automating routine tasks. They're tireless analysts. So I think, businesses are very excited because the AIs can do, they can automate a lot of rote tasks that humans find tedious. And because they're tedious, they don't pay full attention to it all the time. Whereas the AI doesn't care. It just keeps working, and it just keeps working tirelessly, no matter how tedious it is. So I think, for businesses, it's like, well, where do we have people performing repetitive routine tasks? And that's a good place where AIs can, be assistants or supplements. And in some cases, even just take those tasks off their plate so that they can focus on more interesting and more complicated tasks. But then there's this risk of, the AIs are, the AIs talk a good game, right? So it's like they'll generate text that sounds great. They'll generate images that look really interesting. But if you look at them carefully, they're wrong. There are stories about how the, ChatGPT would generate a legal opinion with citations, and it turns out that all the citations were made up. And so if you're not careful to check the work, you're just, the AIs will just completely do something crazy that makes no sense. So I think that's so I think businesses are excited by the possibility of this, but then there's all this, all these horror stories and pitfalls about people that just sort of let the AIs operate autonomously without enough supervision.
Right. And that's why it's so important. The way we think about it is, what is the data you're using to train those models, right? Are we providing some guardrails around how the AI is accessing that information in a way that's safe and secure? and preserves privacy, doesn't leak information inadvertently. So it's almost like it's here, but you have to learn how to use it safely with the right guardrails and the right parameters in place so that we don't run into an issue where somebody's given misinformation. Because like in the case of, Aspire Indiana or a healthcare provider, you can't give them made up information. You can't make up the hours of operation or tell them something that's not true. Oh yeah, we'll take your insurance when really we don't, right? That stuff has to be accurate. And so the threshold or the bar is really high in terms of making sure it's correct. And I think, interestingly, we can use AI to build those capabilities that then, provide those guardrails. And so, that's one of the ways that we think about it within our platform.
Karen, I don't want to dominate the
No, you're
questions,
doing great. As we're chatting, I'm thinking about even being on LinkedIn and reading articles and even sometimes posts now. And the narrative for some of the people that I've been following for a long time, I can tell that it's kind of changed. And I've been left wondering a few times, did they really write this, or are they using, ChatGPT or something else to do it? Because it's changed just enough that the nuances, I'm like, I don't think this is really you. So to accentuate your point, we can't lose ourselves in this, even though there's a great opportunity here for us to do things quicker, better, more articulate, and then really critical to have the opportunity to have the data, feeding the right data in so we get the right put out, right? I don't think it's any different than that. Let's talk a little bit about some more examples on how organizations are using generative AI to make their business processes more successful and more efficient. And then I'd also like to know, are there certain industries that are really escalating its usage? What industries are you seeing that they're really just leading the pack?
Ooh, so the first part of that, I'll jump in on that one. So as far as how organizations are using AI, I'll allude back to what Chris pointed out. Some of those administrative burdens, where we always want to operate at the top of our licensure. That's like one of the big things within. I know within healthcare it is huge. You want your high dollar people to be doing some of those, those more intensive tasks, when it comes to mental capacity and, that skill set. So when you have someone that has like an MBA, you don't want them sitting there answering calls all day. You don't want them, having to enter data into a form all day. So one thing that I see it as, and one thing that we are going down the pathway with is, allowing the AI to engage and interact with our consumers in order for them to capture and fill out that data and information, and then seamlessly pass it back through to the appropriate systems, which ultimately goes to the appropriate parties. So parsing that information, that's something that's huge. Within the healthcare landscape, pre-registration, pre-screening, overall, if there's FAQs, you want to try and allow the AI to interact with the consumers first. And if the AI gets caught up, that's where that skepticism comes in, and you want to make sure you have a fallback plan. Your fallback plan should then be your employees or your staff. That's where we kind of are leveraging the AI within our world here at Aspire.
Yeah, and I love that. I love that healthcare is really thinking about this widely. I have 3 kids, and I get the fun job of often having to schedule their appointments. And true story. I mean, there's been times where I've been on hold 40 minutes or longer, and then I get hung up on because their switchboard shuts off, and now I have to do this all over again tomorrow, and I've accomplished nothing. So in a lot of ways, this whole product is just self-serving, right? Because I don't like to wait on hold. But I love that the healthcare industry is embracing this technology, and organizations like Aspire Indiana are thinking about the consumer experience that way. Also, how can we give people better access to care, make these routine questions accessible, whether it's 10 o'clock at night or on a Sunday, you should be able to get that information. There's no reason why we should hold that information hostage for business hours, right? And so I love that. And then we're seeing, I tend to see this adoption and interest in this in any kind of industry that serves large volumes of people. That's where I'm seeing a lot of, so even contact centers are thinking about it for the same reasons that Demetrius had mentioned. a lot of consumer-facing products, large brands like appliance brands that get a lot of phone calls about, troubleshooting your dishwasher, right, for example, or a refrigerator, things that you really need to working in your house. These kinds of products could be very supportive. AI could be very helpful in those situations as well. How about you, Chris? What are some other industries that you're thinking about? I think banking might be a good one too.
Yeah, I think anything with writing, the AIs are great, and like we're seeing this coming on very strong in like marketing, copy editing, that kind of thing, and that's a perfect application of the AIs, because the AIs will generate something and it's probably wrong, so you have a human review it, and that's very complementary to humans, because it's much easier to edit a document than to write it from scratch. So it's this kind of this symbiotic complementary relationship between what the AIs are good at and what the humans are good at. I think along the healthcare lines, you could see things like diagnostic assistance, decision assistance. Is there a certain decision that needs to be made? Well, the human can make it, but then the AI might concur or might want to point out some information that's been lost. So like I said, they're tireless analysts, and they don't, they don't get tired. They don't slack off, so they can, help humans make better decisions or do higher quality work, because they're always, keeping an eye and helping to point out things you might have forgotten or missed.
I can add to that too. My son is in the Space Force, and currently he's at the Pentagon, and he can't tell me much, but he said that they use generative AI every day, and they were probably using it long before we were, right? Because it's the government. And so I think it's being used in aerospace and defense in a significant way to protect us from our enemies.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I mean, something that touches us all at every industry is cybersecurity. I mean, just think about the amount of data that is generated and requires, teams of individuals to take a look at. One thing that we have added value with is from our cybersecurity perspective, we get the assistance of generative AI, like that next gen AI, where it helps us scour through false positives, actual positives, keeps us on our toes. I mean, it allows us to be able to, petabytes of data are being, examined or analyzed in minutes instead of days like it used to be. So it really is a value add for us. But you still gotta, it's just me, you still gotta have a human component or touch there where you can actually, you can examine some of that stuff yourself. I think it really is still value add.
So there's a lot of lingo in the AI business, just like many others. And we hear about large language models and natural language processing. What are those, and what's the difference between them?
Chris, that's a perfect question.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so I guess how we got here, there were in terms of language, or natural language processing, there were two big breakthroughs. So if you look back 5 or 10 years, we were using what are called recurrent neural networks. So say you're doing machine translation, you want to translate an English sentence to a Japanese sentence. So if you say in English, if you say something like, I am going to Tokyo, that might translate to boku ga Tokyo e itte imasu. And that literally translates as I, Tokyo to, in the act of going, am. So it's kind of backwards compared to English. So a recurrent neural net looks at each word one at a time. And so for it to learn that the second word in English is equal to the last word in the Japanese sentence is very hard for it to do, because it's only looking at one token at a time. So what transformers did was they said, well, screw that. Let's just look at the whole sentence at once, and then we'll output the entire sentence in Japanese. so that we can, it's much easier to see this association between the second word in English and the last word in Japanese. So that was the first breakthrough. And then the second breakthrough was the researchers started building larger and larger models, which is how we get large language models. So when you build a model that has billions of parameters and you train it in a bunch of different tasks, like 1,000 or 2,000 different kinds of tasks, it turns out that the models start to be able to generalize and perform tasks that they've never seen before. So that was the big breakthrough in the last 2 years with the large language models. And that's the thing that kind of enabled systems like ChatGPT to exist. So, so compared with the kind of natural language processing we had 10 years ago, which was either statistical or with recurrent neural networks, the level of performance is just, night and day today compared with what we have had before. And that's why all these new applications are made possible by these new language models.
I've thought about that particular application translation. We've had various members over the years that are in the translation business. I'm assuming that occupation is going to go away.
It's very easy to automate. Yeah. Like, I've got a 2-year-old son, and he watches a lot of kid videos on YouTube, which means I watch a lot of kid videos on YouTube. And what I've noticed in the last few months is, like, if he finds one set of kid videos, then suddenly the same kid videos are available in like 10 other languages. And I was like, how did that happen? And it turns out that YouTube has translation tools. So if you upload a video in English, you can run it through these YouTube translation tools and translate it into any other language you want, and then deploy it out on YouTube in all those other languages and get much more reach that way. And I think this is, the transformer networks and the machine translation stuff was actually invented by Google Research. So it makes perfect sense that they've commercialized this technology in their YouTube translation tools.
Very cool.
Before we continue on with that portion of our conversation, I'd like for us to take a quick little break to thank Arizona Commerce Authority, who is AZ TechCast 2023 innovation sponsor. The Arizona Commerce Authority is the state's leading economic development organization with a streamlined mission to grow and strengthen Arizona's economy. So let's take a break for a few moments and hear from Arizona Commerce Authority.
Our streamlined pro-business approach helps you achieve more by putting less between you and future success. Less red tape, lower taxes, less distance separating you from the tech leaders of tomorrow. This innovative ecosystem will supply your business with tools and resources to compete in the 21st century and beyond. But your future is more than just business success. In Arizona, the lifestyle you want is at your fingertips. Explore cities known for their Southwest heritage and modern vision. Enjoy beautiful scenery and endless outdoor activities on land, water, or snow. And if you're looking for a little friendly competition, we've got plenty of teams to choose from. With constant sunshine, vibrant culture, and natural wonder, Arizona provides a style of living that's entirely unique. People from all over the world call our state home. From student leaders who fill the classrooms of our top-ranked universities, to a skilled and abundant workforce that's ready for what's next. To the neighbors, friends, and peers we interact with daily, Arizonans are united by a pioneering spirit that moves us forward. So as you look to the future, know that it's filled with the perfect balance of innovation and high-quality living that makes life better here.
Plane and moved to Arizona.
I was just thinking the same thing. That commercial was made for the two of you to make sure that you come and spend some time.
Right.
For sure.
They should mention that Arizona is about to have the best Taiwanese food in North America.
That's
Are
right.
we?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, they've imported a whole community of chefs and restaurants for TSMC.
They come just for my spicy beef noodle.
Did not know that. Good to know.
Yeah.
All right, Demetrius, come on out.
I travel for food, so
Come on over, Demetrius. I'll take you out there.
right.
Love it. Yeah, do let us know when you come out. That'd be fun to meet in person and make that connection. So let's continue the conversation around large language model, LLM. What should organizations keep in mind about prompt data ownership?
Well, it depends on the contract terms with your LLM providers. So ChatGPT has some pitfalls in that anything you type into ChatGPT can be used by OpenAI for training. So you've seen some stories of company employees who put proprietary data into ChatGPT and exposed it that way. Some people might, like I think a doctor at one point, a doctor put a write up to a patient in there, which exposes protected health information. So yeah, if you don't know the terms and conditions on your language model, then assume the worst. There's if you go through the API that it doesn't apply, but basically if you're using a language model like this, you have to know the terms and conditions for the data that you're sending it.
So entering data into an LLM could expose your data, proprietary or otherwise, to the public domain. You in your case, you said it was within ChatGPT, but is there an inadvertent opportunity to expose it to the public domain?
Yeah, the sequence could be you give the data to ChatGPT or to an LLM, and then that becomes part of their training data. And then once it's in the training data, it could surface in the future for somebody else. So if someone asks it a question that gets answered partly from your training data, then some of your information could theoretically get exposed that way.
I see new apps almost every day that purport to use generative AI in what they do. What about those if you're not using OpenAI, but you're using somebody else's service in AI, does that expose you to the opportunity of putting your information in the public domain?
It depends on the service. Like if the service says they're going to keep your information protected, or they're governed by data privacy laws that require them to keep your information protected, then they'll do that. If the service is quiet about what it does with your data, then all bets are off, and you have to be careful about that stuff.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I would go ahead, Demetrius.
Yeah, I was gonna chime in on that one. I mean, so from our perspective, one thing that we do is we vet our vendors, right? Perspective, as you're vetting your vendor, you should have controls in place to make sure what's going to happen with that data. What's it look like at rest? Does anybody else have access to it? If so, who are those parties and what are they using it for? So then as you're doing that, you also put legal, guards in place, BAAs or, business associate agreements, you put those in place. You have to make sure that you know what your state and federal rules or guidelines are as well. So a lot of times what we do, and some folks tend to say, oh, well, this was something I use in my personal life, right? And just because you use it in your personal life doesn't make it appropriate to use in your professional life. So when we talk about, the AI tools that some companies are putting out there, it is a good idea to vet your existing companies as well to make sure that the legal paperwork matches with this explosion of AI adoption. So that's one thing that we tend to do in order to make sure that, and as of right now, it's actually on our operations committee agenda for me to talk to it about with staff, because I do hear a lot more where folks are saying, I asked this question of ChatGPT. I hear you guys are deploying and expanding BotCo even more. What does this mean? What does this look like? So just knowing that people are talking about it, one, is a good thing for me. But two, you still have to be vigilant. You still have to make sure you're being protective of your personal, identifying information or personal health information, or IP, your intellectual property. You need to make sure you take care of that as well, because it's just like the conversation with when you put something on the internet. No matter how much you try and take it down, there is a copy of it somewhere. So you've got to be mindful of that. So if you've got some private information that you don't want to get out there, you've got to be really mindful about the AI or the systems that you're entering it into, because it could be a part of a public training database.
Well, maybe at some point we'll have some national data privacy rules so that this is less of an issue, as every state has its own now. And, it makes it very difficult to know what being protected and what's not. Rebecca, I think you were going to add something.
Yeah, I was just going to say, one of the things that we provide, and we also ask of our vendors, is that we look at their compliance, audit trails, things like that. So we'll say, hey, if you say you're HIPAA compliant, do you have audit results from an independent third-party auditor that back up what you're saying? And we also provide those to our customers too. So just making sure that entire chain of privacy is protected within the various software applications that are being used and the different vendors that are part of a solution or a tech stack is really important. So I would even ask, I ask about all of our vendors the same thing, like, can I see your audit results? Can we see your paperwork? We might even do some of our own kind of spot checking as well, just to make sure that everything is as it is said, right, in those systems of record. So without an existing kind of national privacy rule, we have to rely on these kind of industry consortiums that are setting these standards. And that's kind of the practice right now within the industry.
Well, we've talked about vetting vendors and how important that is. Are there opportunities? I'm sure there are, for our employees to misuse generative AI, and are companies beginning to set up sort of rules around the use of these systems in the businesses?
That's a really good question. I think for me, I'm less concerned about the misuse of the AI from our lens, just because a lot of the things that we do is industry shared. It is driven from a place of collaboration. So, when you get information and someone does something, that really stands out, and you start to think about how did they get that info? You don't want to put too many hurdles in place to deter folks from engaging with the solution or tool that allows them to increase their level of knowledge as well as their teams or their company. Because ultimately, the benefit from that is your consumers. We all start to benefit from it. So for me, I'm not a fan of putting hurdles in place, or even worried about, someone's misuse with it. Now, I will tell you, my son, who's getting ready to be a senior, I kind of know what his writing level is. I do know that from an education industry perspective, they're putting in some guardrails that'll actually help protect. So I wouldn't be concerned that my son, or anybody, anybody's child is probably misusing ChatGPT or other AI solutions to the point where they're not learning their material. Because ultimately, you don't want to, in essence, decrease someone's knowledge or skill set because they figured out, oh, I don't have to do anything because I can just let the AI do it. Well, you've got to still be able to engage. You still have to, have the ability to explain and do what you need to do. So for me, hurdles aside, I see it in the professional world as a way for us to bridge some gaps that otherwise we would either need to add more resources, meaning manpower or woman power. I don't want to put any gender on that, but you really do see a benefit from it. So I don't really see it as a bad thing or anybody being able to overly misuse it. At least not right now. So,
I'm with you 100%.
Yeah, so I've heard some data points of companies that were prohibiting ChatGPT. So there was a story of people at Samsung who put some proprietary code into ChatGPT and asked ChatGPT to critique the code. And that was, trade secrets that Samsung did not want to be disclosing to a company like OpenAI. And their response was to ban the use of ChatGPT in the company, but then also to start to set up their own AIs that they can use internally to do the kinds of things that people wanted ChatGPT to do. And I think, like Demetrius said, this AI technology has a potential to give us huge productivity gains throughout the economy. So you can't not use it. But so the challenge is really, how do you use it safely in a way that protects privacy, keeps your confidential information safe, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, and because it's learning, if you will, we all want to be contributing to ChatGPT so that it continues to get better and better and more accurate as time goes on.
And with that, though, there are some ramifications, right, around privacy, specifically HIPAA and GDPR, CCPA. Let's talk a little bit about that. What are some of the concerns when it comes to AI or LLM, when it comes to compliance?
So from my angle, the concern really is we are a behavioral health care company at heart. We do integrated, care. So we have an integrated system of care approach to healthcare here at Aspire. So with that being said, we've got 42 CFR Part 2 requirements that we have to have in place, which is the substance abuse and behavioral health, psychotherapy specific protections for patients and clients. So we do have that concern. However, we already have policies and guardrails in place that states that you can't put patients' PHI, their psychotherapy notes out in the public. So it's just a matter of education. I think as long as we continue to have the conversations out loud and not in private, not in like some super secret high level meeting, you make sure you open up forums that are for your frontline staff, as well as include your consumers. That helps you kind of stay in front of, any of those issues when it comes to the Privacy and the Protection Act, because again, we don't have a national standard. States have their own interpretation of some things. We do have the HIPAA privacy and security that everybody adheres to, but some states have even more tighter constraints. The SOC 2 compliance type 2, stuff like that is really what we try and keep at the forefront of what we do. Ultimately, it is education and communication around what's the good thing to do and what's not the good thing to do.
So for Rebecca and Chris, you have Gen AI Chat Cloud. First of all, what is that, and how can that be combined with LLMs to provide even more extensive service to your customers?
And this one, we actually have a good slide for this. We came prepared.
All right.
Love that. I think it's our first slide in I don't know how many years.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rebecca.
We're just trying to show a couple of visual aids here to tell the story. And Chris, you'll have to kind of describe it out loud for the folks that maybe are just listening.
Oh, I thought you were going to talk. Okay. So the Gen AI Chat Cloud, and I'm usually not used to answering this question. It's basically the thing that Botco does is our goal is to give you state-of-the-art natural language and AI in a very low code, no code type of environment, so you don't have to see all the details behind the scenes. So as part of that, we believe we're moving into this environment where there are many language models available. So in addition to OpenAI, there's a number of open source models. Google is about to roll out their model, and we expect some other models as well that in addition to the general purpose models that say OpenAI and Google might have, there will be some very specialized models that know things like drug interaction, clinical diagnoses, et cetera. So we designed our architecture to be plug and play for these models. So we have our internally trained models, we have OpenAI, we have other third-party models, and we can basically go to the right model for any specific for any specific task. As part of that, you have to be careful, as we've been talking about this in this session, you have to be careful about what you send to these models, because if it's a third-party model and you don't have the right contract terms in place, you have to be careful about the kind of information you disclose. For example, protected health information under HIPAA. So what we have to do is scan the prompts that we're sending and make sure that nothing sensitive gets sent over, or if there's a BAA, then we're okay. If there's not a BAA, then we have to scrub out or anonymize any data we send over to avoid disclosing PHI.
So I used to work in aerospace and defense, and a BAA was a broad agency announcement. What is what is BAA?
It stands for Business Associate Agreement. So it's an agreement between, so in this case, say the healthcare provider and the technology provider, that the technology provider would adhere to the certain standards of security and privacy and protecting that information, and making sure that there's also adequate reporting in place should there be a leakage or breach that takes place. So it just outlines the specificity of how the data has to be protected, what is considered protected information, what needs to be encrypted, and then what are the ramifications if something goes wrong. Yeah. That's kind of in a nutshell.
Yeah, and HIPAA is a national level data privacy law.
Right.
And so it governs like organizations that have data, and then their vendors or associates that will do things with that data on their behalf. So the BA is the agreement between the data owners and the vendors.
Got it.
Yep. It from my lens, it makes me feel better, because at that point, it's a check to say, I'm going to treat your data as if you would treat your data. That's the good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So what about success stories, implementation of generative AI or integration with generative AI? Can all of you speak to some real world examples?
Sure. I mean, from my lens, and I'll throw a shout out here to Botco. One of the ways that we've saw success with them is we struggle. We struggle with staffing with our contact center. We struggle with the vast complexity of our organization. We have many different service lines where some of the service lines may overlap. Some of them may not, but when we ask for something as simple as financial assistance, when a client or person interested in services with us is curious about how we support from a financial perspective, and someone is trying to call, and our contact center may not have the answer. We have to connect them with another department. The other department is busy doing face-to-face interactions. We now have the ability where Botco, when someone goes to our website, we have named our Botco through an agency-wide contest. AVA, it stands for Aspire Virtual Assistant. So we rebranded Botco as AVA, so it makes it a little bit more user-friendly. So as people are asking AVA for financial assistance questions, they now are presented or will be presented with a form that would normally be filled out during registration. So it cuts down on that time. So it makes it where our staff and operations and practice management are a little bit more efficient, because they now have that data ahead of time, so they don't have to do it while the person's there, which means that time is now allotted back to the clinical team so they can actually spend more time with their patient. So really has been a success story for us. It's important to note, though, that we really are, when we talk about the skepticism, we help control what data is being presented when folks are interacting with AVA. Now we have the InstaStack, so that is also helping, to the point where when we go and look at, interactions and see what the probabilities are, it's a higher probability. It actually connects them with more of the information. We can keep our data updated. So it really helps, not just from the consumer perspective, not just from our operations perspective, but me personally, I'm be selfish here, it also helps us from a technology support perspective. So it is all the way around successful for us at this point. So.
Beautiful example.
Thank you, Demetrius, for that. It's always great to hear it's working. And Demetrius is not alone in talking about this. You know, we typically hear that kind of story from our customers where they're saying, "Hey, I can support more customers with fewer resources. This gives us better access to let our clinicians, like you said, operate at the top of their licensure, not managing forms, right, which nobody wants to do." And with staffing constraints being so huge, particularly in healthcare, it can make a tremendous difference for the experience of everybody involved, truly.
Chris, any other examples or outside Botco that you can think of that would be useful?
Well, I mean, coding is one that I see on a day-to-day basis. So it used to be you had to type every little thing, and if you got something wrong, you know, you had to stop and fix it. And now the coding assistants are great. You kind of like start typing something, and it just completes it for you. And you know, when I first started using it, I was like, how good could this be? But then it started, you know, like you just start writing something, and then it just like writes the rest of it for you. So it's kind of a different, you have to get into a different mindset because you're just kind of like thinking in broad terms, and then it'll write the details down for you. But you know, you can write a lot more code much faster. So I think that's a huge success for the AI technology.
Also,
Yeah, and we're even using AI to generate scenarios. So like when we bring on a new customer or a customer has a new service line, it used to be that we used to tell our customers, hey, bring us all the questions that your customers have asked you in the past, or give us your transcripts. We don't have to do that anymore. We just use AI to generate the types of questions people will typically ask, that kind of business, and also generate the answers. So you used to have to create the questions and the answers. Now the AI will create both. And we can even run scenarios like, okay, now test this chatbot, test it and tell me how good it is. Before we used to have to do the testing. So even from coding to implementation, all of that has now been automated in a way that we can now really support, even us as Botco, we can now support more customers too because of the technology. So it's like, it kind of layers itself in so many ways. If you really think about all the possibilities in using it, it's fantastic.
Well, since we have a drought of software developers in this country, that's probably a really great thing, right? We're having to outsource or nearshore or whatever. So now ChatGPT can do it for us. So Karen, I think we're getting close to time. You want to ask the last
question for us. And I think we've kind of have circled around this, so it might be more of a summary, but let's see if it springboards a little bit more around this. What are some of the best practices that organizations can enforce when considering the application of generative AI? Let's summarize, but also let's see if there's something else there that we can offer our listeners and viewers.
I mean, I like to say, think of where you might be experiencing a business issue where you could really improve the experience. So whether you're trying to improve throughput or customer support or productivity, I always say, like, start with a problem and then figure out, you know, how can generative AI solve that problem, and then just make sure that whatever solution you use has the guardrails in place to do it safely, right? That you're not going to end up with hallucinations and such. But I would always say start, you know, don't feel like you have to boil the ocean. Just start with like a problem that you're tackling. And then all of a sudden you'll see all the ways that you can apply it in other ways. That would be my best practice.
That's great. Anything you left out?
So yeah, I would say, just to add to that, I think that the thing to keep in mind is that in terms of text or NLP, the models are very good at speaking, but you have to assume that all their facts are wrong. So in terms of best practice, that means when you're designing processes around these, make sure you have review steps so that you're not giving the models undeserved autonomy. And I would say a second important thing is make sure you understand the contractual terms around how you use these models to make sure that you're in compliance with all the relevant data privacy laws.
Yeah, Absolutely. I agree with both. With me, it's always identify a need. What is that need, and can the AI help versus hurt? I think that is one of the big things. And like Chris mentioned, thank you for that, Chris. I think that's one thing that oftentimes we forget is that you have to have a QA process. You got to be able to test. You got to have your quality assurance. You got to be able to test what's going in, so that way you can be assured of what's coming out is valuable. That has been one of the ways that we've done it. I'd say we've had some lessons learned. I'd say we've used some best practices, but one of the lessons learned has been don't boil the ocean. Really understanding that you can and you should take it slow. You don't have to try and accomplish everything at once. Choose a specific department, a specific service line, have those conversations of what and where the AI can help with efficiencies, because you don't want to alienate, your staff or consumers. So you don't want to shock the system too much, but you do want to have the system feel comfortable, create some small ripples so people feel comfortable in the wading pool. And then when they're comfortable, put some floaties on them. That helps you be able to kind of address any concerns or issues moving forward, to the point where you can say, all right, now we've got this problem. Here's some potential recommendation solutions. Now here we are where we can bring the tech in to offset, some of the concerns that we have, and pilot it, test it. There is nothing wrong with testing it. You can deploy it today, and then on Monday, turn around, test it again. It really is a good thing when you test, because you may see something that you or the team didn't see during the initial implementation. So, just test it.
Well, I could see an entire league of consultants growing around helping companies employ or deploy OpenAI. So.
Absolutely. And how soon can we anticipate that there will be some national, standards or regulations around this? You've kind of hinted around that a couple of times, but is that in the works? Does anybody know? Or is that a far-fetched dream?
I feel like the Tech Council is probably more involved in legislature and legislative activity than we are.
Yeah, well,
that's why we belong to the council, so they can help us with that.
Good plug for AZ Tech Council.
So we have an AI committee. It's very robust. In fact, the person that created the AI program for Intel is one of the co-chairs. The head of AI for ASU is on the committee. And I've recently asked them to take a look. The president has proposed some rules and regulations around AI, and they have an RFI out right now, a request for information. So anyone who has ideas on how the government should regulate AI, there's an opportunity for them to weigh in right now.
Yeah, good. Fantastic conversation. We sure appreciate your expertise and your willingness to share some examples and stories, and even some of maybe the pitfalls or the things to be mindful of. And we want to thank Bianca, who is not with us today typically, as she's always responsible for bringing such great panelists together. So thank you all for your time. We greatly appreciate it. You've been listening to AZ TechCast, brought to you by the Arizona Commerce Authority and Arizona Technology Council. Arizona Commerce Authority is the state's leading economic development organization with a streamlined mission to grow and strengthen Arizona's economy. Thank you again to Arizona Commerce Authority. If you're interested in being a podcast participant or sponsor for the Council's AZ TechCast, please contact marketing@aztechcouncil.org to learn more about opportunities to further position you as a tech expert, influencer, or innovator. Until next time, I'm Karen Nowicki. Thanks again for joining us for AZ TechCast.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of AZ TechCast with Arizona Technology Council, featuring leading tech and business experts that help influence and shape our great state and the industries they serve.